from your everglow. You can't deny you feel alive. I tell you secrets and it's something you already know. Girl, if you feel it, I feel it, I do. Don't wanna waste it, I just wanna hear you love me too.
Good morning, you guys. A really cool comment recently on my latest video that was about why I had gone back to working a 9 to 5 if freelancing had been working out for me so well, and I realized that I actually never touched on why I went back to a 9 to 5 or anything relating to switching up what I was doing. So hopefully in today's video I can take you through kind of pros and cons and what made me decide to take the leap back into 9 to 5 after having freelanced. The one thing just to bear in mind is that I had freelanced twice previously, so it's actually not my first time going from freelancing to a 9 to 5. Before I worked as a digital marketing manager, I was actually freelancing as well. I really didn't enjoy that period of freelancing. I had clients that I didn't feel aligned to, whereas more recently I felt a lot more aligned to my clients. So it was a harder decision to make this time around, because the last time I was just miserable, and when I was offered a corporate job I was very happy to take it, whereas this time it was a way more complicated decision which needs a little bit more explanation. This is my outfit for the office. This looks creased, but hopefully it's mainly just because it's kind of one of those tops that is sewn in at the middle. So this is actually thrifted off of Yaga. I think I did a swap. I didn't even pay cash rands for it. So I'm trying to wear all of my thrifted stuff at the moment.
Help me, help you. Let's see it through. Help me, help you. Help me, help you. I gotta say it, can't escape you. Got me hoping everything is as it's meant to be. It's your devotion.
It is a couple of days later. The other clips from that day were a little bit all over the place, and it was such a long day. I didn't feel like filming when I got home, so I thought that I would rather wait for the weekend so that I'm a bit more chatty and articulate as well. I think I had just a long one that day, so rather than trying to convey some of the pros and cons, I thought I would rather sit down and convey them to you guys like this. So one of the points that I'd mentioned was really around the fact that it wasn't my first time either freelancing nor going into a corporate job. So I kind of knew what the pros and cons would be. The difference being with this transition was it was a company that's a lot younger, it's a lot more tech focused, there's a lot more systems and tools in place, and I knew this because I'd actually freelanced for them. So they were my client previously and then became my full-time employment. So I really had a good sense of the business, the culture, and those were all the sorts of things that had kind of put me off the previous corporate stint, where obviously you just wouldn't know going into it that it's maybe not for you. So I had a lot of benefit from having freelanced for that client to actually know that it was something that I knew I was going to enjoy. The team are super young and fun, and therefore I'd already developed friendships with the team. And so I just felt overall a lot more positive about the decision to change this time. I also knew that the nature of the role was a lot more creative. So my job title is pretty much a content team lead. So I oversee a team of both photographers as well as writers. So very creative, and I think that is also one of the reasons why I was a lot more open to it, is that it was not as corporate or not as stuffy in my mind, and so therefore it was kind of a little bit closer to the freelancing side of things. And by that point my interests had really shifted. So my interests have never been in a very formal job. I think I thrive in those creative, like studio environments that are a little bit more kind of agency centric, or like an agency within a brand would be the case in this instance. So overall, I just felt like it was a better match to me. And like I mentioned, obviously knowing that the company was a really nice bunch of people was also super helpful. So that was the one probably biggest piece or decision factor. The other thing was I was battling with a couple of things with freelancing, which I don't think I was ever really open about. Like, I think people see your posts on social media and just assume that you're like thriving. And there were a few things that I really was not thriving in. I think I was quite lonely working from home for like 2+ years. So when I wasn't traveling, I really kind of felt conflicted as to whether what I was doing was correct. And then every time I would investigate like co-working spaces, I just felt like, is it worse being lonely in your own space or being lonely like in a co-working space? Like, it's still not people who I'm engaging with day to day. So I think there was like a loneliness component that really got to me with freelancing. And then I also think, like, because I wasn't being scrupulous about the kinds of jobs that I was taking on, I would take on huge amounts of work, would end up working pretty long hours even though I was working for myself. The benefit was it was at my own time, if you know what I mean. So I would often work very early in the morning. Like, I love waking up at like 5. And then, you know, I can either exercise or I can work for a little bit, then I can exercise. So there was like benefits from a flexibility perspective, but overall I would say I was actually working longer hours as a freelancer. And then of course, all the natural things like not being able to know what your salary is going to be the next couple of months. So lots of kind of uncertainty. So I think you can't overstate the benefits of a corporate role. There is a huge amount of support that you get from your manager, from your team. And you also need to bear in mind that there's healthcare benefits. There's the benefit of being able to take annual leave. The entire time that I was in Perth, I was working. So even though it looks one way, it looks like, oh my gosh, you know, she's living the dream. Like, I was really working very hard, and I had a webinar at 3 a.m. the one morning. And yeah, I just remember working really late, like working till 10 p.m. at night because of the time difference with South Africa. So although it's on you and you're super committed to make it work, so you'd never complain about it, it does obviously take its toll after a while. So I would say that 9 to 5, it's a lot more measured and yeah, just sensible. You always feel like you're working moderate hours, you're not working after 6 p.m, let's say. You feel that you can take leave, which, like I mentioned, was something I was battling with. So now I'm actually going to Perth pretty much almost the identical timings as what I had last year, but this time I'm on leave, like on annual leave. And like, I can't think of a recent time that I've taken 2-3 weeks off. And when I do have time off, obviously, because I love making YouTube videos, a lot of it is Skillshare or YouTube or in some way relating to passive income, which is amazing, but it also takes its toll on you emotionally after a while. So that was kind of the big rationale for kind of going back to corporate. In terms of the pros and cons, the interesting thing is that everything I love about my 9 to 5 is what I hated about freelancing, and what I loved about freelancing is what I don't enjoy about a 9 to 5. So it's an interesting one, and I definitely don't think that it's easy to kind of summarize it. I think it's where your heart is at the time. So when I was freelancing, I was leaning into the flexibility, I was leaning into the remote work thing, I was leaning into a lot more video creation, which I hadn't done previously as much, or, you know, in a corporate role, but rather as more of a passion project. So I was able to work more on passion projects that then became, you know, more lucrative as opposed to the 9 to 5 side of things. So those are all the things that I was absolutely loving, you know. But then on the side of the 9 to 5, it was like, you know, I recognize that a freelance business is not a scalable one. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but that is the truth. Like, you only have a finite amount of hours in a week or a month, and therefore, even if you were to progress on that road, eventually you'd start to hire. And I think I was getting to that place where I would have to start hiring people. And although I did work with freelancers now and again and people on Fiverr and that sort of thing, and it was amazing, you know, like getting to work with other young people who are as talented as you and who bring a whole different set of skills to the table. ultimately, I wasn't sure that I wanted to be responsible for other people's salaries and paychecks and all that, and that was kind of where it was getting to. So I don't want to ever complain that like, oh, I had so much work that I had to start outsourcing stuff, but it was starting to become stressful because it was more than what I could manage, and I never really knew what to do with that overflow work. So although I would have strategic partnerships like with other freelancers and that sort of thing and other agencies, like at the end of the day, because it's my name, it's a bit harder to kind of outsource something and feel good about it. So I think in future I would obviously think about starting another business, potentially even starting an agency, and then have it be very transparent that it's not me doing the work. I'm the overseer, the manager, and the business owner effectively. So I think that's also a huge part of it, is like you can't freelance forever if the work just becomes more and more and more, you know. You have to very much like level out what it is that you're wanting to do. So if you never wanted to hire people, never wanted to employ people further than you would be more and more scrupulous with your job intake, and then you would just take the clients that you were really happy with and have it fill that 40 hours a week or whatever. But with me, because I hadn't been particularly scrupulous, I'd just taken more and more and more, I was like, got to a place where I was like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know who to say no to, who to let down. And I think just generally I do battle with those sorts of conversations. So I did find myself kind of wondering, like, not to be a victim of your own success, but like just not always having the answers and not really knowing what to do, and people having huge amounts of expectation on you. So I'd say that people who have never freelanced will never quite understand the SMS that you get on the 25th of the month, where you just get a paycheck, you haven't invoiced anyone, you haven't had to, you know, like work with freelancers, negotiate SLAs, negotiate like with your clients. You've never had any of that sort of level of negotiation. So it's just a different ball, you know, a ball game altogether. So for better or worse, it's very different. The final thing that I would like to mention is just on the financial side. So although freelancing is far, far more lucrative, you do need to factor in your hourly rate to account for the fact that all your hardware is your own, all your software is your own. And then over and above that, the 21 leave days or 30 leave days or whatever you decide to give yourself a year need to be factored into your hourly rate. So when people quote freelancer rates, it's like, let's say in your 9 to 5, your hourly rate is 250 Rand. People will then go freelance and charge like 300 Rand. But that is like patently incorrect. Like there's no way that if your hourly rate as a 9 to 5 salaried employee is 250, that you can function on 300. And then you'd be like, oh my gosh, you know, I've just given myself this amazing like increase or whatever. Like that's just not how it works. If your hourly rate as a salaried employee was 250, you'd probably have to charge about 500 as a freelancer to account for all these sorts of expenses. And so I think from a tax benefit, it's really nice to have expenses. Like I was buying cameras and lenses and laptops for that reason at a point. But ultimately you do need to factor that into your hourly rate. So it's not just about like, oh my gosh, I get to charge so much and make so much more profit. You will charge a lot more to make a little bit more profit, and then you will have a lot of other expenses that, you know, are trying to like reduce your tax and just keep things in check. So I hope that clarifies. I hope that, yeah, that this video has just been a little bit of food for thought in terms of some of the things I would suggest thinking about if you are going freelance. What I will say, it was some of the happiest years of my life in my career. Like one of my life mottos is about like not gatekeeping, so not letting people say to you you're not able to do something, you're not ready to do something, you're not good enough at something to do it professionally. Like you absolutely are, you know. And like if your self-belief and your willingness to work is at that point, then the world's your oyster. And that's what I loved about the freelancing, is it was like all about creating your own opportunities and not having to wait for a manager to be like, it looks like you're at that level where you can proceed from a junior to mid-level or whatever the case is. Instead, it was just like, well, what do I think I'm capable, what do I think I'm good at? So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I can't wait to see you in the next one so that we can keep on doing digital better.